Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're actually going to finally start getting into Angular. And I think what I'm going to do, we're going to just spend some time doing a separate application today using Angular. And I want to introduce this idea of TypeScript. And we just want to understand how it really works. And I think what I'll do in the next video is I'm going to rebuild the task manager as a single application on one view. Okay, so what we're going to have is an Angular front end, and on that single view, we're going to have everything to do CRUD, which is create, read, update, and delete. Okay, and there's going to be no page reloads. So everything is going to be dynamically updated when we go and do that stuff. And to try to give a demonstration of what that really means, I've put together this little slide, and I've got this really ugly background just for the purposes of showing that it's a consistent single view. So what I'd like you to do is just look at this and pretend that this is my index view. My web page only has one index view. And customarily, what you've been used to is always having multiple different views. You know, having all new HTML pages, CSS assigned to it. You've had all these separate pages. So throughout, you've navigated to different places and all that kind of stuff because you have a bunch of pages that you're trying to navigate to. But in this particular case, we're not actually navigating to new pages. So I want you to imagine that this is a single index page in your application, and that's all that exists. Okay, so what happens is we have all these different components. So typically what you would be expecting to see would be your nav bar. Okay, so maybe you're going to have a footer inside there. But what happens in this sort of paradigm is we have this idea of components. Okay, so we have one single view, and I want you to imagine that you had a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and you had a bunch of sticky notes. Okay, and you're writing little notes, and you're taking the sticky notes off and putting on a new one. So what I've got is this component that goes over top of my sheet of paper. Okay, so when I want to make changes to my site, when I want to update things dynamically, what happens is I start to remove my component or my sticky note, to continue the analogy. So then what happens is I can bring in a different component, right? And then I can mix and match components. So we get into this idea of building components. Okay, so if I get rid of those components, now I can bring in different components that have different shapes and sizes. So that's really what we're trying to do, is have a single index view where we're swapping out all of the components. Okay, it's really important to kind of conceptually understand what we're doing here. And the way we build these components is with something called Typescript. Okay, so all of these components are built inside this Typescript idea. Okay, so let's get over back into our WebStorm and start figuring out what we're going to do with that. Okay, so I'm going to set up this new project, and I'm going to do some stuff through my command line. And I've already copied the path to where I want to save this. So I'll do CD, Control V, where I want it to go. Okay, and now that I'm in there, I'm actually going to do some global installs first. Okay, so I'm going to do the Angular version of, say, an Express generator. Okay, so it's going to be the CLI, the command line interface package. And I also need to install something called Typescript, because Angular won't run without the Typescript files. So I'm doing this globally. So what I'm going to do is do an npm. So this will be npm I for install, and it'll be at Angular, and then it's a /CLI. So for command line interface, and then -G for global. So don't forget the -G. So hit enter. You can see it's doing its installation. The other thing we're going to have to do is the Typescript, which is a similar command line. I'm getting this message here asking me if I want to share anonymous usage. I'm going to go with no. Capital N. Okay, I'm just going to say no. Thanks. Okay, so the next one we want to do is the Typescript. So now that that's installed, I'm going to do my up arrow and just do some editing. Okay, this will be install Typescript. And again, that'll be -G. So npm I Typescript -G, and we'll hit enter. So now that we have the CLI, you have to understand that command line interface, it actually comes with a bunch of different commands that we can use. And ng, which is the one we're going to use next, ng is Angular. It means Angular. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the new project in this file folder, and I'm just going to say ng new, and I'll call this lesson 9. No spaces in my actual file name. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to say no. This is asking me yeah, I'm just going to hit no for this one. Okay, and do you want Angular routing? And I'm going to hit no. I don't want Angular routing for this one, so no. And then it's asking me which style sheet format that I want. So I don't want any of the fancy ones. I'm just going to go with the normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill CSS. So I'll hit enter. And now it's starting to build my Angular application. So it's basically scaffolding like we had done with the Express generator before, but now it's doing it in Angular. Okay. So the file's been created, and I've just navigated to where I created it. And I open it up, and if you can look at all this stuff, there is an enormous amount of files in here. So let me just right click in here and hit the properties, and you can see how monstrous this particular project is. It's 351 megabytes, and I haven't even done anything yet. Okay, so it's a very large framework right now, and if you were, and I don't mean to bash on this framework over .NET, but .NET is considerably lighter. This is much more beefy, just as a framework, just starting out. Okay, so if you look at this, we do have a lot of different files in there, which is interesting because there's also a README file for GitHub. Okay, and if you get into the node modules, you know, it's just got a lot of stuff in here. What else? E2E source, like there's just files all over the bloody place in here. Okay, there's our JSON, Angular, there's our package JSON, there's a lot of JSON files in here. Okay, and then so let's open this up in our WebStorm, and then maybe we can poke around in there again too. So I'm in WebStorm, and I'm going to select open and just navigate to where it was, or where it is. I just have to find it. And it's right in here, lesson 9. I'm going to open that up. And in here you can see all of the different files that came with the project when we scaffolded this out. Okay, so I've got some stuff going on in here, tons of that stuff, the node modules, and our source files. Okay, so this, like we said, is quite a beefy framework. Inside the project file, what I really want to quickly look at is the file structure itself and some of the items that are in there. Okay, so we've got our typical file name. I'm not going to talk about the E2E right now, but I want to get down here and we're going to talk about source and a couple of the other files that are in here. Okay, as well as environment. But If you remember at the beginning of the video, I show this slide and we talk about this idea of one index page. Okay, and that is this one here. So this index page is really what you're looking at when I talked about in the slide, the single index page. And this looks like your typical HTML setup. But there's one thing that's very different about this page right now. And it's actually this line 11. It's your app root. Okay. And if we look back inside our file structure, you're going to see that I've got this source, this src source, and I've got this app file. And if we look inside that app file, you see that there's 5 different subfiles in there. Okay, and there's 3 of them that I really want to look at right now. And the first one is your component file. And this is Typescript. Okay, so I don't know if you're familiar with Typescript or not, but if you're not, we're going to quickly go through what's going on in here. For the moment, I want you to consider more of this as being your version of JavaScript. Okay, so it's not exactly the same as JavaScript, but for the purpose of just trying to understand how all this goes together, consider this our working version of JavaScript. Okay, so a really important thing we talked about early on in the beginning of this video is this idea of components, right? And we said that we were going to keep one single index and we were going to switch out components. And we have this thing called a selector that actually defines which component we want to use. Okay, so in this particular case, we have app root. Okay, so the name of this component, and the way we're going to be able to identify it, is going to be by its selector, and that's going to be app root. Now, also note there's some URL references here. This is a template. Okay, it's a template to the URL, and you see the way it's written, it's actually mapped. Okay, so it's the root of this folder, which is app, and it's a component, but it's also the HTML that is specific to this component. And right down below, we also have the same thing again, which is the .css. And I want to point your attention over to the file folder, and you can see here is the HTML and here is the CSS. So if I click on that, there's nothing in this CSS, but this CSS is dedicated to this app component. Okay, and this HTML is dedicated to the same app component. And what you see in here is there's a lot of tags, and there's also a lot of styles. So this is a mix of HTML and some CSS inside this particular file. Okay, and I want to point out that there is a global style sheet down here inside the environment. Okay, so that doesn't have anything. You can style globally as well. You can style specifically for the component, and then you can make very even finer detailed styles inside of this particular HTML template. Okay, now the TypeScript is in a sense, it's the way that we're defining what we want to use inside there. Okay, and right here we've got this public class called app component, and that's the title is lesson 9. Okay, we also have this down in the this folder. It's called main TypeScript. Okay, we're not going to do too much with this, but you have to be aware that it is in there, and it is very different than, let's say, main from, say, C++ or something. That's not the same sort of an intent, actually. So let me close that one down. And so what I want to do is actually look really quickly again now at these files. So you have package.json, okay, and there's some things in here that you're used to seeing as well. Okay, but for example, you see these dependencies in our JSON file. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of Angular ones in here. Okay, there's Angular for router, uh, forms, core, compiler, different things inside there. Okay, and these are all dependencies for this particular project. And you can see here the name is lesson 9, the version, and then the scripts. These are all scripts. So you can see right here, one of the ways that we can start this web application is through something called ng serve. Okay, it's one of the ways that we can run this. So don't really need to look at the package lock.json. There's a README file in here. Okay, and it is semi-populated here with different information there. Okay, so what I really want to do is take a moment and just review this in a contextual way. Okay, just so that it makes it a little bit more clear in your mind what's really going on. Okay, because at some point we're going to be talking about the modules. Okay, but for now I'm going to set that one aside, and just I want you to be aware that it does exist inside this folder. And then there's this other folder here that also exists in the app. So there's 5 different files in here. But right now, I just want you to get your minds around how the structure of all of this is working. Okay, so not going to worry about this one so much, or the module. Okay, so let's take a minute and just have a look at a slide. So when we look at, this project, we talked about the idea again of having this one single index HTML. Okay, and I already showed that to you in the file system. Okay, so what happens next is that when we want to call this component, okay, the index HTML is calling that one particular line, and I showed you it was on line 11, this app root. And that is how this one is assigned to the HTML page, the index HTML. Okay, and within that, that component, we have our app. An app has these 3 particular features in them that we can use to manipulate everything specifically just to that box there that delineates that app component. Okay, and I did say that there was 2 other files in there, but right now it's important that you just get your mind around the way this works. So again, if we had a web application we were working on, and let's say, for example, it had a nav bar, it had a footer, and you wanted to have different features on the website, what you're doing is you're actually calling these individual components. And each component is made up of, it's got a name, and we decide on it from a selector. So as an example, we get rid of one, we clear out one component, and then we call in another one based on its selector. So let's say, for example, our selector was called component 2. Okay, we would call component 2 inside our single index view page. And then again, if we wanted to use and manipulate a different component on our page, we would be able to call those onto our site, and we would identify those all based on that file that I showed you. All of these component changes would be happening inside that single index view that we talked about. Okay, so when they go away and then we replace them with another one, all we're doing, the goal is to just change our components inside the one original view. So I hope that's a little bit more clear. It's a little bit different than you're probably accustomed to when doing this, but in essence, that's how it's supposed to actually work. If we look again back in our index HTML, this is that app root that we're calling. The only thing in this particular HTML that we're seeing is everything that has to do with app root. And so what I want to do is actually run this page, and you'll see what I mean, because we're looking at our index page. There's only one HTML index page for this application, but we have an enormous amount of stuff going on just inside this app root. So if I run this, the way I'm going to do it, I'm in my terminal. I've got one of a couple of ways I could do it. I could just go up here and press this play button. That's one way. Or I can just do npm start. Okay, and it's going to run this on the server. Another way of doing this is our ng-serve. That's something you saw in the JSON that I had mentioned earlier. But it's going to run this, and one of the ways I can do this is just click on this local host right here, and it opens up this page, and this is what the website has rendered to. Okay, so you have to understand that I'm only looking at one component here. And if I go back into the code, okay, all I'm looking at, that entire view, everything is inside this app root. Okay. So if I go to my HTML, that's why this particular HTML page is so heavily condensed, or sorry, heavily populated, because there's a lot of different things that are going on in here. Okay. So there's a ton of, mostly what it looks like is a lot of CSS. Here is some, finally some HTML stuff. So I've got this div for the toolbar. I've got these different cards. All of this stuff is written inside the HTML portion of this. Okay, so if I look at this one, for example, next steps, and I go back to my website, where do I see that? That's on the page somewhere. It should say next steps. I just can't see where it says that. It's actually probably if I click on one of these. Oh, sorry, it's right there in the middle of my page. Okay, so all of the HTML is actually done inside this app.component HTML. Okay, so it's really important that you fully understand what's happening inside this page. So let's look at the Typescript. All I've done here is I've created my selector to call this app root file. Okay, and that's all that's really going on right now at this point. Okay, so that's my selector, which is inside my HTML for my index, and this is how my index page is identifying it. Okay. All right. So I hope you got a good firm grasp of all the working pieces inside the different files that we're going to be working on, and how it's actually going together, and how it actually all just comes together. A little bit like orbiting planets around the sun, and you know, the index page being the sun, everything is orbiting around that. Okay, and maybe some of these files are all the moons. I don't know. It's a very strange analogy. I get that. But there's a lot of really interesting moving parts that are happening in here, okay? I want to point out something else from this HTML file in our app component HTML. Is you'll notice down here on line 333, we have this span tag, but you'll notice this is actually handlebars. Okay, and handlebars is something that we were previously using when we were doing the task management. Okay, so inside here you're seeing some handlebar syntax. Okay, so something I've done now is I've actually I've minimized our actual web page, and in the back, let's see if I can do that again. In the background, I've got the actual component open for this, and you can see the title for handlebars. This is actually this particular title right here. This lesson 7 app is running. Okay, and that's what this says. Title app is running. Sorry, I said lesson 7. It's lesson 9. So if I go into my app component to find this title, okay, and let's say lesson 9 Angular. Okay, and then I save this, and let's go back to there, and you can see now that this updated. Okay, so this is where we're using our handlebars style of programming. So let's move on and see what other things that we can do with this. So let's go in there and clean up a lot of this stuff on the HTML page. And I think what I'm going to do is remove everything out of here from line 340, where it says resources, all the way down to the bottom. Keep going to the bottom. Okay. And there might be that final one div that I might want to keep, that last one there. But we're going to get rid of everything in here. Okay. I may or may not. I don't know if I've got a matching tag for that. I think I just passed it, but I don't know really. I don't think I did. It should be down below. We'll find out if it's causing an error anyway. Okay, so it looks like this one might be that div there. Maybe not. I don't know. We're gonna find out. Another thing that we could probably do is take all of the CSS out of this particular HTML page. Okay, because we have a global. Now, the reason I'm gonna put that in the global is because I kind of like the look and feel of that so far as it is. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is to keep that look and feel, I'm gonna put that in the global styles CSS right here. So let me open that up. There's nothing in it. And if I go back to here, I'm going to use everything from line 11 all the way down to, it looks like maybe, let's keep going, I'm in the 2s. Okay, I'm still, okay, all the way down to 298. Okay, so I'm going to Control X all of that. I'm going to put it all in my style. I'll go back there because I've got these 2 style tags that I don't need. So I'm going to clean those up as well. All right, and I've got them all globally set. So I'm going to do a save and let's go back and see if this makes any real difference. And it doesn't. I'm still running the same exact look and feel on my current component. Okay. So you can see that I have the option to put it all in there. Now I could just for fun, Control A for all, Control copy. No, in fact, Control X. I'm going to take it all out of there. And now let's see what happens if I put it in my app component CSS. Okay. And I'll drop it all in there. Press save. Let's see if that makes any difference. Okay, and let's refresh that, and it doesn't make any difference either. Okay, didn't make any difference. So what I am going to do though is I'm going to keep all that stuff inside my inside this particular global style. Okay, and I'll close out that one. So you see that I've shown where I've had 3 different locations of the exact same HTML, and it's doing all of that stuff. But it just has a different association attached to it each time. Okay. So when it's in my component CSS, it is meant to just do CSS for that entire component. When it's global, it means it's doing it to the entire index page. Okay. And when it's specifically inside the HTML, then it's even drilled down further to very, very specific components within that HTML that it's calling. Let's look at something really interesting. Typically what you would do if you're trying to troubleshoot or debug some of your code is you could go to the actual page and right click on it and say view page source. So down here. But look at what's going on right in here. Okay, all of that stuff is being hidden from us. All we get to see is this app root, but everything else is hidden from us. Okay, so really, really difficult to try to go in there and debug or troubleshoot what's going on here from that perspective. I just thought I'd show you that because in case you were again going to be trying to go in there and look for this, you're going to have a hard time. Okay. However, all is not lost because if I right click on here and I do, say, for example, inspect, I can get a little more fidelity on what it is I'm looking at. So right here, you've got this app root. There's this line of code in here, and you can try to expand some of this a little bit more if you want to. Okay, so it just depends on where you're at. And then you can go to the source and you get a little bit more information about what's going on if you want to really do an inspection on this. Okay, and then of course console, elements. Anyway, it is in there. You can see some of it. You notice right down here in the element, you can see the line that I'm on right here, which is app root. Okay, if I want to go to the body or the HTML. Now, look at this really closely. Look at my HTML. If I click on the HTML, that highlights the entire component. Okay, so for this particular page, there is only one component in there. Okay, and it's actually everything that's actually in there. So kind of this app root is really responsible for everything that's going on inside this particular HTML. Okay, so if I highlight the HTML, you can see that puts that box there, but it's only got the one component in there. Okay. Yeah, anyway, that's all I wanted to show you on that particular piece. So let's go back into the code, and I'm in my index.html. And if we go to the page and we look right here, it says lesson 9 localhost 4200. Okay, when I go back into here, if I want to change that, I can go into this particular title right here and say Angular intro. Okay, so if I save that and then I go back out, you can see now it says lesson 9 Angular intro. Okay, so this particular title is a different one than what you see in here. Okay, I want to make one little kind of clarification too. Okay, so there is JavaScript involved in this, but for the most part, we're not dealing so much with the JavaScript as much as we're dealing with this new idea of TypeScript. So that's really what we're going to concern ourselves with the most, and a lot less about the JavaScript. It is in there. So is Node. Node is in there as well. But we're not going to concern ourselves as much with JavaScript so much as we are with TypeScript. So I'd like to do some work inside here. And where I'm going to start is actually in my components, okay, my app component. And right above the component, what I'm going to do is declare this class. And how about we do this? We're going to define a game. Okay, a game class, sorry. And this is going to be export, and we'll call it class game. And we'll give it two properties. So one will be ID, and we'll call it number. And that'll be a semicolon at the end, and then a title. And that's a string. And it'll be a lowercase string. Okay, we'll put the semicolon there. And I'll actually just, is there anything in here that's wrong? It might just be finicky with spaces and stuff like that. Looks to be okay, but it doesn't like the way I've done this commenting. So it didn't like the space that I had in there. That's okay. So now what I can do is go back to my app component. And this is where I can create an object now. Okay. And we're going to say that this object is game equals. Sorry, I'm not doing this right. I have to actually do a game equals the bracket, and it's got an issue with white spaces and stuff like that. So it'll be ID space. It'll be 1 and then a comma, and it'll be title. You can see that it picks it up there. Title and we're going to call it square bracket or a single brackets. I don't have a good name for it. Minecraft. We're clearly not going to build the entire Minecraft here, okay? And then here I need the semicolon to finish it off. Now it's going to give me an error, probably because it just doesn't like, some spacing or something along those lines. So what you see up here is that I've created the class up here, and then I've basically created the object called game, and I've initialized the two properties or two variables or whatever, however you want to term it, inside of here. Okay, so it's got an ID of 1 and a title of Minecraft. I'm going to just change that. I don't want to say Minecraft. I'm going to say Pong. I don't know why. Okay, so I'm going to save that. So now I can go back to my component.html and do some changes. Now, remember what I said before was that when we created this class, this title, we used our handlebar to call it. Okay. And just to be clear, there's a title here that I'm putting in and a title here. They're different. Okay. So if I go all the way down to say the bottom of this, and at the very bottom below that last if, I'm going to just do an H1. Okay. And in here, I'm going to say games. Okay. And down below that, now what I can do is, let's say H2. And inside that, we're going to use our handlebar. Okay, so this is double quotes, and we're going to say game dot, and you can see there I've got two options, title and ID. So I'm going to do game dot title. Now remember that it's game title that I'm interested. So when we go back to here, I'm not looking for this title. It's the object games title that I'm calling. Okay, this is why I said game. Okay, so let's save that and go out and see how that looks in our page. So there it is, games, and it's calling Pong. Okay, I got to come up with a better name for a game. Okay, I've decided to change my game because I've only played one game today, and it was the 5 a.m. snooze button. So I've changed that title. We'll go out here and you can see that it's now called, our game is 5 a.m. snooze button. I suppose it doesn't really matter what I call it. But let's try something else where we're going to actually create an array. So the syntax for this is much different. Okay, so we're going to go with I'll do capital. Let games, colon, sorry, not semicolon. And we'll say games, game, and this will be square brackets, and this is going to be equal, and square brackets again. Now inside here, we can go into the curly brackets, and we're going to say ID colon 1, comma, title is going to be, let's go with anything. Right now, we'll go with Minecraft. Okay, we'll go with Minecraft for this one. Okay, and then we'll do a comma because we're going to put a couple of rows in here. So this is going to be ID colon 2. And this title is going to be, you know what I'm going to do? Doom. That used to be a game I really used to like. That was a very long time ago though. And then I guess, what did I used to play with my, in my Wii was, I think, tanks or something like that. I don't know. Sorry guys, I know this is a buzzkill because I'm not a game player. I don't know the games. So 3, comma, and the title here is going to be tanks. Okay, and then I'll close that off with a semicolon at the end there. And it doesn't like something here, so I'm getting this note. It basically says it's just never being assigned. So that's okay. So now what I can do is go back down to my app component and I can change this. So maybe I don't want this the way it is. So I'm going to call this games one instead. Okay, so this is going to be games. Take out all this stuff here. Okay, and I'm just going to, okay, and this is actually, I think I want this to be an equal. I'm not sure yet. Let me check. But anyway, I'm gonna go out to, I got this error. What's it say? That's okay right now. I'll forget the error. Now let's go back to here and make some changes in our HTML. So below this one, I'm gonna take this out. Okay, and we're gonna make some changes. I'm gonna put this in an unordered list. So UL, okay, and class equals items. Okay, so just gonna do it. Okay, that didn't work out how I was hoping. Okay, the IntelliSense for this is a little bit unusual in terms of our Typescript. It just gets a little bit cranky, it seems like. Okay, so in here, we're going to do an LI, and this is going to be star NG for Angular, and then 4. Okay, and then this is, it's good. It's got the equals, it's putting the quotations in, and we're going to say let game of games. Okay, and then in here, I got to close that off. In here, I'm going to use my handlebars. Okay, and this is going to be game.id. Okay, any space in there? Okay, I think I'm getting this error. Okay. So one issue is I've got this as lowercase games. All right, and let's look here again. So it looks like it's okay, and it recompiled. Now I want to sort of draw your attention to a couple of things, right? There's this idea of getting the proper, let's say, spelling, I guess is the best term for it. Okay, this is games. This is games, and I'm calling games here. But when I look at my HTML, I'm actually saying game.id. So the syntax can be a little bit challenging, okay, because if you look here, this is my array. It's a singular game with no S. Okay, so it's gonna take a little bit to get used to here, okay? If we go back out and we look, you can see that it's actually rendering in our games. So what I like is that it did throw the error, showed the failure, but eventually when we straightened out the code, it actually shows you down in this terminal window that it's compiled successfully. So it did that on its own. I didn't have to go in and try to rerun this. It just did the compilation here on its own. So we're going to do a little bit more to this line here. We're going to wrap that because I also want to get the title. And the way I can do this is I just keep this line, and I'm actually going to go in and do a span. Okay, in the span and the class. And that is going to be, I'm going to call this badge. Okay. And then close off this span, but I have to move this one to the outside over here. Okay, now inside here, I can do another handlebar and say game, okay, dot title. Put some space in there. Now let's go and see what's going on. Okay, so there you've got the ID as well as the title of each and every one of them. Let's go and pick apart this game versus games issue a little bit here. The first thing I did was actually create this class called game. And then I made an array of games, and the type is actually game. Okay, so this game is from this class game. Okay, and then it's just an array. So it's an array of these game objects. Okay, and within game, you can see that I've got ID and title, which is ID and title. So this is an array of objects that came from game. Okay, so that's why it's like this. And, you know, it can be a little bit daunting or confusing as to why am I using games versus game. And you'll see this happen sometimes. And then when we get into a style of a for loop, it even gets more confusing, right? So why is it like let game of games? Okay, so you have to really be careful, and I suggest to people to start getting in a habit of being a little bit fanatical with their naming conventions. Okay, create their set of standards that they always follow. You know, if I'm going to create this, as an example, this class, make sure it's singular, because you're trying to instantiate one version or one copy of it in the future. Now here I'm trying to call that, but if you noticed, I'm doing an array. So I'm saying let games. Okay, so we're calling the actual array games here. You know, it's not easy to get your mind around right away, but it's really important that you start to get naming conventions consistent throughout all your programming. So another thing is, why might I be putting it in this particular order on my apps component TypeScript page? And the reason is because I'm doing all of this definition work up top, but it's not until I get to here in my selector that I'm calling it to the index page. Okay, and so now I can put all this stuff below, and then I get to go and reference that in here, just because this is my app component HTML page. Okay, so I'm going to edit this game so that I can actually, let's say, click on the name of each game, and it will open up this tiny little form, and then maybe we can actually use that form to change the name of the game itself that we've clicked. So I'm back in my HTML, and I'm going to go under my list. Let me close that formatting up. And I want it to only be visible, this form to be visible only if the user clicks on the game title. Okay, so we're going to do select. Okay, and it's going to be *ng if. Okay, and we're going to say selected game. Okay. Sorry, I need to close that off. And I do expect I'm going to get this error. And that's because it's actually looking for a value to select. Okay. Right now it's got nothing in there to select. So I'm going to go back into my TypeScript, and I'm going to add this other property right here. Okay. And this is going to be selected game, colon, and we'll say of type game. Sorry, semicolon there. So any property now that we add to the component, we can then reference this inside our HTML. So in here, we're going to do this idea of data binding. Okay, and so let's go first though and just set all this stuff up. So I'm going to do an H2. Okay, and this one's going to be called game details. Okay, in the next line, we're going to do a field set. Okay, we've got the field set in there. And then I need a label. And this label is going to be capital ID. Okay, that's all that's going to be in the label. And then this is where it starts to get a little bit more important. So I'm going to do an input. And this is the whole data binding piece. So I want to do a square bracket. I'll do two square brackets because I'm going to need them both. And in here, it's going to be ng model. And you can see right here, it pops up on there. And I'm going to do this ng model, hit the enter. And inside this, I'm going to say selected, and you can see it. It pops up there, selected game. Okay, we're going to do dot ID. Okay, but I'm getting this error, right? It doesn't like what's going on. And so if I click on this, what's happening is it's saying that sorry, where'd my message go? Property ng model is not provided by an application directive, blah, blah, blah. What I really need to know is this import forms module. Okay, so if we go up to our node, okay, do I have my forms? There's a lot of files in here. Do I have forms? There's form data. Sorry, that wasn't in this part. It's actually in the Angular folder. So I accidentally bypassed it. So right in here, forms, your Angular folder, and then forms. So this is what I need to input. Okay, so if I go down here, I hover over and it says import forms module. And I'm going to say yes, do that, import that in. So save. Now let's go back out and see what's happening here. Okay, if I click on it, still nothing really going on. Okay, that's okay. We got a little bit more to do. Actually, I do see one little error right now too, because I didn't close out my input tag. It's not just that I don't need this square bracket. So I'm going to duplicate this entire field set. So I'll copy that and do some editing. Okay, and this one is not going to be ID. This one's going to be title. And I'll change this down here to be title. And it's the only one that pops up there. Okay, so I'll hit my save. While I don't need to continue to save it, the form does save or updates, but I just like to be in the habit of always hitting my Control-C after I've done something. We still need to go up and modify this part of the our ng for loop. Okay, this is because we're going to cycle through every time we click on the actual game. That's where there's going to be this event. And what this is going to be, because we have to do some work in here and then create another method. Okay, so this is going to be a click. Okay, this click here, and it's going to be, we're going to call it on select. And inside this on select method, we're going to call it game. Okay, and get rid of that. Now, it's not going to do anything right now because we have to be the ones to create this on select method. Okay, so before it works, we've got to actually build this piece. So what's really neat is if I do highlight on that, let's see what the message says. It says unresolved function or method on select, create method on select. So yes, I'm going to do that. Now you can see it went to my Typescript and it started to build out the structure of that method for me. And in here, we're going to do this dot selected game equals game, semicolon. So let's go test this out on the site. Okay, so if I open that up and I go to the first one and I click on it, you see that I'm getting this drop down arrow. Okay, so there's an issue going on here that we still need to resolve. So one issue that I have is this tag is actually incorrect. So this tag should be selection. So TION. And that one down here should be changed. So actually, and I'm missing a, it should be section, not selection. So section. Okay, so that's a big difference there. Okay, let's go out now and see what's happening. So if I click on any of these, you can see that it is selecting the game I want plus the title. Now, suppose I want to go in and change this to anything like, let's say 5 a.m. Snooze button. Okay, sorry. This should be actually updating, and for some reason it doesn't want to update right now, but let's also go in and troubleshoot this, because this, what I was expecting was this to dynamically be updating. Snooze. Okay, so it's not updating, so I clearly have a bit of an issue here. Let's go in and troubleshoot this and fix it. So there's one thing that I'm seeing right down here on my line here in 69 is I'm actually missing a round bracket. And I think that's going to have an impact on what's going on. So let's go out and see if I click on one of these games, let's go to Minecraft, new game. You see there now, it's dynamically updating as I go. And this is that two-way binding idea that I've actually bound to this title and this title at the same time. So any changes I make now simultaneously are getting updated to my page. Okay, so let's say I've got the new game. I click off it. Now I want to go to Doom. Okay, notice that it actually stayed as it has been changed. Okay. So I've gone in and I've changed it for the line 65 as well with the brackets. So if we go to this page, there's no indication whatsoever that we can click on these lines. Okay, there's nothing there. So I think what I want to do is go in and change some CSS to make it so that if you hover over your mouse, you get some sort of indication that you can do this, have this functionality here. So let's go back to the top of our LI, and we're going to define a class so that in our CSS we can actually go and find this, and we're going to define it as game. Okay, so this is how in CSS we're going to be able to identify the specific changes that we want to make. So I'm going to go to my specific app component.css, open that up, and I'm going to call this dot game. And let's see, is it looking for it? Is it in there? And there it is. So dot game is what we want. Okay, and this is where we're going to do our CSS. So we've got this one here, but we're going to make two of them. So I'll do a copy, paste, but this one is going to be a game, and this is going to be hover. Okay, so that when we hover over, okay, we're going to have a different effect. So in this one here, we're going to say cursor will be a pointer. Okay, and it's definitely not a C++ pointer. So don't worry about that if any of you are having a nightmare right now. Okay, so this one's going to be text decoration, sorry. And we're going to say underline. Okay, and next thing I want to do on this is set my color to, I'll just take the first one there. Okay. So let's go over to this and check. So you're seeing this. Now I've got this indication that when I hover over top of it, something can actually happen. So if I do that, you're seeing this and this and this. Okay. Let's spend a bit of time dressing this up a little because it's slightly ugly. So in my label on the first one, I'm gonna create a class, and we're gonna call this one game label. Okay, and I think I'll do the same down below in my other label. So I can go in and actually grab this now, copy. All right, and I've introduced a bit of an error. Okay, that's good. Now if I go back to CSS, now I can do this. And in here, I'm going to do width. Okay, width will be 50 px. Okay, display will be inline. Inline block. And then last thing I'll do is font weight will be bold. Okay, and that's all. And let's go see how it looks. Okay, I click on that and you can see that it's changed here. And just to be clear, I can also change this too. Okay, Minecraft. Okay. So we've got the two-way data binding, and now we've got some CSS formatting and stuff like that that we've put into this. Okay, I'll change that back to 1. Okay, good. So what is very unusual, and I'm also happy to report, is that this is actually going to be a very short video for me today. All I wanted to do was introduce the concept of Angular and how it goes together, how it works, all the different moving parts in here. Okay, the fact that there's only a single index page that we're doing, and then we have this concept of components. And inside the components, we have these sub files in there, which is our HTML, CSS, and you know, this module here, I don't want to forget about the module. I don't want you to think that there's only 3 files in each of these components. There's not. There's actually 5, but primarily today what we've dealt with was just the HTML, the CSS, and even the Typescript file. Okay, so really quickly what we did, you know, is we defined a class. We used those objects in an array, and we output inside our HTML. Okay, and then we did a little bit of CSS work. So not a lot for this class, but I hope it just goes to show you that this is a very different mentality that you need to have in your head to keep, to make this work. Okay, because probably what you're accustomed to is always making the entire HTML. But if you've come from .NET, then you're thinking about this framework in a completely different way again. Okay, so you know, just I could mention 3 different frameworks right off the top of my head. You know, just plain old vanilla websites where it's a million HTML pages, a bunch of styling, lots of JavaScript. You can move to something as lightweight as it's lightweight, but it actually lifts a lot of its own weight, and then some, which would be a .NET mentality. And then coming back to this somewhere in the middle ground where we've got the 1 index page, but we still have to do a lot of HTML in just different locations. Okay, so very different mindset to be in when we're doing this Angular stuff. But it's still pretty cool in a sense too. You know, it's just it's another way of doing it. So I think what I'm going to do is just end the video here, because next week I think we'll get started on maybe rebuilding the task manager or something else. I don't know. But we're going to do this in a different way. And the last thing I want to leave you with is that this, for the most part, all this part has been our front end stuff. Okay, so when we come back next time, we're still going to have to deal with this thing called services, because you may be wondering, like, how do I build in the stuff we did previously to this? How do I incorporate Mongo into this? And things like that. So we'll come back and figure that out, probably in the next video, and we're going to try and put it all together. And I hope I can do it all in one more video next week. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to knock it off there. Have a good week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.